Good evening. It's always a pleasure for me to travel the world and share my story, and Baruch Hashem, this evening I didn't have to travel so far. I have been privileged to live here in Eretz Israel. This coming Pesach, it'll be 22 years. It is incredible. And I've lived in my community, Bayit for those 22 years. What I'm going to do with you this evening is to share a vignette of short stories and explain to you how I, as an ordained minister and the entrepreneur of a travel agency specializing in group movements to Israel, I came to Israel the first time and fell in love with the country. I was with a group of Christians, and by the way, just in case some of you don't know that, I was an ordained minister. And we were leaving Tel Aviv, coming into that first curve into Jerusalem. And my heart started pulsating like it was coming out of my chest. And I said, oh my God, I'm at home. When I said that, I really meant it. I had worked for Continental Airlines for many, many years and had been all over the world. But Israel was the first time and the first place I traveled that my neshama felt rooted and knitted to this land. Today I know it was a soul resonance when I came around that first curve into Jerusalem. As we are taught when we study about Pesach, that Pesach is the redemption of the Jewish people and it's the redemption of every Jewish neshama. And not only that, our rabbis of blessed memory say that every Jewish neshama was present at Har Sinai, past, present, and future, and the mazel of a convert. Well, I feel like my neshama was there, and in retrospect, I realize now, many, many years later, that I was headed down this path my entire life. Back to that first curve coming from Tel Aviv into Yerushalayim, my heart's pulsating like it's coming out of my chest. Isaiah 40 has always been one of my favorite chapters in the Torah and the prophets. And it says in Isaiah 40 this, it says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, lift up your voice, lift it up with strength, say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, Hashem will come with a strong arm. His reward is with him. He shall gather his sheep unto himself and lead his flock like a shepherd. After I quoted those psukim, those verses, I started singing to the top of my lungs. Don't worry, Rabbi, I'm not going to sing tonight. And all of the other Christians on the bus were looking at me like I was losing my mind. But what I find interesting about this story is I knew I wanted to live here. But at that time, I did not know that I was converting to Judaism. So, enjoyed that visit, saw some of the most incredible sights I've ever seen in my life. And I was living in Los Angeles, California at that time. I flew back to LA. And what's interesting is after that first visit, I came back to Eretz Israel 14 times in 40 years. Everyone that knew me thought I was literally losing my mind, but it was like a magnet, and I simply could not stay away. Back to Los Angeles, flew back to Israel every time I had a chance. I was working with Continental Airlines, had lots of vacation. I've been with them for 23 years, and so whenever I had a group coming, I got on the plane and came with the group. Now I need to give you the catalyst for making my decision to move to Eretz Israel. It happened January 17th, 1994. That day will always be forever embedded in my mind, and if we have any Californians in this room, you know what I'm referring to. It was the Northridge earthquake, and I was one of these people that had a practice of getting up every morning, davening from my Hebrew sitter, an ordained minister, but I taught my own self the Hebrew. And it had Hebrew on one side, English on the other side. I didn't even know the format of my prayers at that time. But I also felt that it wasn't proper for me to go into prayer. I knew nothing about Modeh at that time. But I felt it wasn't proper for me to go into prayer and talk to God without washing my hands. This particular morning, I woke up at 4:30 and I said it's a bit early because I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So at 4:32 a.m. my bed started shaking and I said perhaps it's just a dream and you're on an airplane and it's bad turbulence. However, about 3 minutes later, after I was shaken violently from the bed to the floor, I said, get up, girl. It's not turbulence, it's an earthquake. I got up, I started running, I fell down at the stairwell that led to the loft in my condominium. And I fell down and I looked up at the ceiling and there were these plants dangling back and forth from the ceiling. And it looked like they were going to come tumbling down on my head. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, taught all of her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the Psalms. I learned them when I was 4 years old. So whenever any difficulty arises in my life, it's like the appropriate Tehillim just kind of raises up in my neshama. This particular morning, Psalms 121, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from which cometh my help. All my help cometh from Hashem. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel, neither slumber nor sleep. Hashem is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. He will preserve you from evil. He'll preserve your soul. He'll preserve you going out and coming in from this time forth, even forevermore. By the time I got to the last pasuk of that particular Tehillim, I finally regained my equilibrium, got up, ran to the front door there, and finally got the door open. It was still, the aftershocks of this earthquake were just as potent and violent as the original impact. I ran down the stairs, and I saw one of my neighbors screaming, and I threw my arms around her, started praying for her. She and I went and sat by the jacuzzi while all my other neighbors were sitting. And as I sat there this particular morning, I said to myself this: you have been saying you want to live to Israel, move to Israel. And I made that decision this particular morning. And as I said, the aftershocks were just as potent as the original impact. And as I've lectured worldwide, people sometimes introduce me and they say Ahuva's story is one of physical earthquakes as well as spiritual earthquakes. That's a good way of putting it. I was there with all of my other neighbors, and about 2 hours later, I finally got the courage to go back upstairs to my condominium. Now, I was very steeped in my Gashmias, and I had lots of it. And when I opened the door to my condominium, I literally could not believe my eyes. Those plants that were dangling from the ceiling were all down on the floor on my beige carpet. And all the other large plants and pottery were all upside down. And ladies, I want you to know, when I went in the kitchen and saw all of my crystal and china broken that I had purchased in London, I almost plaques. And then my attention shifted from my material belongings, because they were all in shambles, to my sister who lives in Beverly Hills. And I said, Hashem, I hope my sister's okay. I picked up the phone lines. Of course, the phone lines were down. And then all of a sudden, I just ran into the bedroom. And Baruch Hashem, I had on a nice flannel nightgown, all covered up, because everybody was down there by the jacuzzi in their pajamas or whatever. I ran and found a right shoe and a left shoe. I don't even know if they were matching, skirt and a blouse. Ran in the bathroom, found a toothbrush, toothpaste, threw it in my purse, grabbed my Bible, locked the door. And as I was running downstairs to the garage, I said, Hashem, I hope my Mercedes-Benz is not smashed, because the garage was under the condominium complex. Got the door open to the garage. My car was fine. Get in the car, and the ground is shaking crazy violently. Normally, I would take the freeway to get to my sister's, but I said to get there safe, take Sepulveda, go straight over to Beverly Hills. I'm driving for, I don't know how long it took me to get there, because normally it was like a 20-minute ride, but this particular day, nothing was usual. Get to my sister's in Beverly Hills maybe about an hour and a half later, and I get to her apartment, and everything's fine. The only thing that had happened to her is I think a tree had fallen on her Cherokee Jeep, and our parents had been trying to get you to us for hours, because I'm assuming that they had heard about this earthquake on the news or something of that nature. And finally, I don't know after how many hours, the telephone lines were finally back up. My mother got through to my sister, and she said, put Dolores on the phone, I know she's moving. And I could hear my dad in the background saying, is Dolores moving back home to Chicago? And when I came to the phone, I said, Mom, tell Dad I'm not moving back to Chicago, I'm moving to Israel. Now, my mother normally is a very calm person. And she said to me this, and I know maybe perhaps some of you in the room have heard this. She said, Dolores, you used to be one of the most obedient children I had. I'm going to put your father on the phone, and perhaps he can talk some sense into you. My dad came to the phone, and he said this. He said, Dolores, you're just a bit shaken up by the earthquake. Calm down. We'll call you back in 2 days. My parents called me back in 2 days. And when they saw they could not talk me out of this decision, they simply said this. My dad said this. He said, Dolores, where are you going to live? How are you going to support yourself? And he says, you don't know the language. I said, Dad, those are great questions. Everyone that knows me have always said I'm a woman of Ahuva Gray, faith and trust in God. I said, I have no idea where I'm going to live, no idea how I'm going to support myself. And I said, I'll learn the language. In my opinion, if anyone decides to make Aliyah, don't do it the way I did it. Hashem was really watching out for me. And when I came to Israel, I had been privileged to meet a few religious Jews before I moved here. And I stayed in Old Katamon with Rabbi Mordechai Goldberg and his family. And then I was invited to Bayit, and another dear friend of mine, Yosef HaKohen, whom I had met through a project I was working on with Ruth Brody Sharon. He lived in Bayit. So I was invited to Bayit for my first Shabbos. And when I went to Bayit for my first Shabbos, and we were walking down the streets in Bayit after the Friday night meal, it simply felt at home. I had been registered on Ben Yehuda at this apartment listing. They had not ever had a listing in Bayit. And that Sunday after that Shabbos, when I went down there, they had an apartment in Bayit. That was the first apartment I had there. And, you know, it's so interesting because my community, you know, Bayit is known as a Haredi neighborhood. And as I've lectured worldwide in universities, especially in Oxford University, in Oxford, England, and in Georgetown University in America, when they invited me to speak to the Jewish students, and they would say to me, Ahuva, what is it like for you being African American and living in that Haredi neighborhood? And I say, well, I moved from one black neighborhood to another black neighborhood. I feel perfectly comfortable living in Bayit. And when I say that, I really mean it. My community has loved and embraced me the entire time I've been there. My rabbi, Rabbi Hyman Sapsal, was a Talmud, Rabbi Cutler Sapsal, incredible people. I called him and him and his wife, my Abba and Ima. And you know, Bayit is incredible. That's all I can tell you. Before I wrote my first book, and I need to share with you the challenge I went through with the Best In, but and how I came to the realization that I was going to convert. I knew I wanted to live here, but I didn't know I was converting. That family that I mentioned to you that lived in Old Katamon, I had been here for a tour with a Christian group, and then I had another group that was coming, and it was before the high holidays. And all of my Jewish friends had told me how special it was to be in Jerusalem for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And before this second group was coming, I saw on the news that there was a bus bombing. And then I was contacted and the group canceled that was scheduled to come. And I said, well, it's very close to the high holidays. And all of my friends have been telling me how special it is to be here for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I stayed. I stayed at the Moriah Hotel. They changed the name of all these hotels over and over again. And I went to Rabbi Mordechai Goldberg and his wife for Rosh Hashanah. We were walking down the street after, and I went to Bet Knesset in the car. And we were walking down the street, and everyone was saying, Shana Tova, Hak Sameach. I didn't even know what it meant. They said it to me. I said it back to them. When I went to the Goldberg's home, Rabbi Mordechai Goldberg had explained to me why we were taking this apple, dipping it in the honey, and he also had to explain to me why this fish head was on the table, and it looked like these two eyes were staring at me the entire night. And finally, after that lovely meal, we're coming up on the holiest day of the entire year, Yom Kippur. And I called his wife, and I asked Abigail, I said, what do I need to do to prepare myself for Yom Kippur? She said, Ahuva, the Jewish people fast, but you're not Jewish and you're not obligated. And I said to her, if the Jewish people fast, I'm going to fast as well. I walked back to Bet Knesset Yakar. I walked in on Kol Nidre. I did not know that Kol Nidre was a nullification of all past and future vows. I sobbed all the way through Kol Nidre. Neither did I know that you do not talk during Kol Nidre, but I certainly know that today. I sobbed all the way through Kol Nidre, and there was this lovely lady sitting next to me. She just kept patting me on the shoulder, passing over the Kleenexes. And I looked at her and I said, I have no idea what's going on with me. She tapped me on the shoulder again. And when I left, Bet Knesset Yakar that particular night and walked down the streets in Jerusalem back to my hotel. It was like the peace of the Almighty. I've not ever experienced anything like that in my life. There wasn't a car, kid on a bike, airplane, motorcycle, anything. And I walked back down the street that particular night to the hotel and I said, I know who my God is. There is some pasukins in Isaiah 40 that says this: every valley should be exalted, every hill and mountain should be made low, the crooked places should be made straight and the rough places should be made plain, and the glory of the Lord should be revealed and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of Hashem has spoken it. I felt like that's exactly what had happened to me in my life. I had been on this search mission for 48 years, and it all culminated in Kol Nidre, Baruch Hashem. That's when I knew that I was converting to Judaism. After I broke the fast at the family that I was acquainted with, I told Rabbi Mordechai that I was converting to Orthodox Judaism. He didn't seem to be so surprised. The next person I told was my dear friend Yosef HaKohen Safsal. He wasn't surprised. It's so interesting in retrospect. No one that knew me was surprised because people that I were close to realized that I was headed down this path, but I didn't really realize it until I experienced the high holidays in Kol Nidre. And after all of that lovely, lovely experience, of course, I flew back to California. And this is not the kind of information that you tell your parents on the telephone. So I called my parents and told them I was coming home to Chicago. I had something to discuss with them. And when I went to Chicago, we had this lovely meal my mother made, and I said, Mom, I want to discuss this with you and Dad. I'm going to be moving to Eretz Israel. And my parents just looked at me, and my mother, and I said, I'm converting to Judaism. And my mother looked at me and she said this, she said, Dolores, I know any decision that you've made about God, you thoroughly investigated. My mother has seen me my entire life stay up all night marking up books and Bibles and reading and studying. That was my whole life, and I always loved reading. I had known since I was bat mitzvah age that I was going to write a book. After I realized I was converting and came here and moved to Bayit and went to the mikvah and moved out of the dorm at Nishmat when Nishmat was still in Bayit. I went to my second apartment in Bayit and I didn't even have a Dell laptop. I had a legal pad and a pen, and I said, now I know what this story is about. And that's when I first started writing my first book, My Sister's a Jew. And after that book came out, my first book, My Sister's a Jew, then I got incredible invitations to start lecturing all over the world, to such exotic places like Hong Kong, all over Australia, all over Europe, all over America, all over Canada. And people kept asking me, are you going to write another book? And I was exhausted from all that traveling, and I said, leave me alone, I'm not writing any more books. However, there may be some authorists in this room, and if you get enough stories, you'll always write another book. My second book is entitled Gifts of a Stranger. This book is a book about all the incredible Jewish communities that I have been privileged to lecture to worldwide, in incredible people, incredible communities, lovely families. And at that time, I thought I was finished as well, but not necessarily so. My third book is a new revised version. It's called Journey to the Land of My Soul, and it's a new revised version of My Sister the Jew because I own the rights to my own story now, and I self-publish everything. And then after I finished that, I really thought I was completed. However, the job is not done yet because it was before a year before the holidays, and I started just kind of sitting. I had a computer by now, sitting at the computer and thinking about incredible stories I had heard over Shabbos, and I said, write a book about the Hagim and stories you heard over the Shabbos tables. My fourth book is called In Search of Hidden Treasures, and that's what this book entails, is incredible stories. Some of them are true stories, some of them are stories that people wanted to remain anonymous, but they're all in this book, and I was given permission to write that book. And my fifth book is called Mind Over Matter, and my sister started a business, and it details how to start a business during retirement. And Baruch Hashem, I really thought I was finished then, but my sixth book about prayer was still in my computer since 2007, and I just finished that up. And my graphic artist is in the process of laying it out now, and she'll be completed probably after Pesach. It's always incredible for me to share my journey with people and to explain to you how I came to the realization that God is one. And when I look back over my life, I was headed down this path my entire life. And coming to Jerusalem that first time and experiencing that level of holiness, that's when I knew, I didn't know I had a Jewish neshama, but I certainly knew I wanted to live here. And you know what, I often, when I say, there's a pasuk in Habakkuk 2 and 3 that says this, because that happened, and then it took me like several more years before that vision came to fruition. But Habakkuk 2 and 3 says this: the vision is yet for an appointed time, and in the end it will speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, it will surely come. It will not tarry. And my realization came after that earthquake, and I did end up moving here, and in my humble opinion, it's one of the best decisions I ever made. And we are going to leave some room for questions and answers after we have the next lecturer. And I just wanted to say that I did order books for you all to be autographed, but they did not make it in the mail, so we'll be sitting outside, and if anybody wants to order one of these books, that'll be perfectly fine with me. I want to close with this pasuk and Mishlei, and it says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge God, and he shall direct your path. Behold, that echad de Ehud. In all your ways know him. Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure for me to share my story.